Hi, I'm Erik Linask with TMC. I'm here at Cloud Expo at the Javits Center in New York talking with Full 360's Larry Hill. Larry, thanks for joining me and welcome.
It's my pleasure. It's my pleasure.
So maybe a good place to start. Tell me about Full 360. What does Full 360 do?
Okay, we're a systems integration firm. We're based in New York City. Been in business for about 16 years now. Have done large-scale data warehousing, business intelligence, those sorts of things primarily for large financial institutions. Deutsche Bank, Citibank, Merrill Lynch, Bank of America, those sorts of institutions, where we learned to do the most complex, the most sophisticated data warehousing and business intelligence applications. We still have a line of business. We're a consulting business at the core, but we've recently signed an agreement with a consortium of software vendors that are coming primarily out of the open source world to offer the Agile Data Warehouse, which is a stack of software vendors that provide a full data warehouse and business intelligence solution on the cloud. It also runs on premises, but there's a lot of interest in business intelligence in the cloud today, and so we're promoting it primarily in that fashion.
Well, that's certainly a shift in trends that we've seen over the last year or two with larger enterprises actually accepting doing work in the cloud and storing data in the cloud.
Yeah. Well, the security is always the first issue on everybody's mind, and some companies are getting by that faster than others. Amazon does a remarkable job of locking down data for you. You know, they have a hypervisor layer that requires explicit permission to access. So you're locked down within their environment, and they can even go to the point where they'll give you one of these little hardware code generators that changes the password every 30 seconds. I mean, you can lock it down tight. So in addition to their being SAS 70 compliant, which handles a lot of those issues, they also have the ability to do HIPAA compliance, for personal medical data. So the most sensitive, one of the large banks in the city here, their investment management group, which is all the high net worth, all the real sensitive data, the Switzerland crowd, they've just approved Amazon's cloud for data and applications after a very, let's say, extensive review. So it's a secure place to put it, but everyone needs to prove that to themselves. And so that's part of the conversation we have. And we can involve, as an integrator, we can involve all of the vendors or a specific vendor as appropriate. We work very closely with Amazon. Amazon is more than happy to provide a security expert to sit down and have a conversation with a company to work them through the issue.
Is there a difference between what Amazon does in terms of security versus other private clouds?
Well, they do offer what's called a virtual private cloud, which is the cloud equivalent of a virtual private network, which adds another layer of authentication and security into an application. So where Amazon really takes you is you get to the equivalent of, if a corporate data center is attached to the web, they have, that's an access point, right? So it's really no different from the fact that it runs on an Amazon server or runs on a corporate server. You still have an access point to the web, and you've got to protect that. Amazon does as good a job as any corporation around of protecting that.
Excuse me. Now, you mentioned that a large portion of the folks that you're working with come from the open source space.
Yeah.
Is there a general acceptance, especially, we're talking a lot about the larger investment banks in the world,
Yeah.
Is there an acceptance of open source technology?
There is a growing acceptance. Everybody is starting to look at it. We see a couple of mega trends going on in the market right now. One is the rise and the acceptance of open source, because what you generally have in open source as a milestone is it's about 80% of the functionality of the established vendors, the Cognoses and the business objects, for about 20% of the license price. So anytime, in my experience, I've been in this business over 30 years, anytime you get to the point of about half price, when an alternative is less than half the cost of what you're using now, that's where you get into invasive technologies, where by their very nature, their very cost, companies out of due diligence have to take a look at them, because what's typical in software in particular is that usually it's only about 20% of the software that gets used. So if you can map the 20% that you use within the 80% that the new vendor offers, you don't need that extra 20% that your traditional vendor is charging you 2 or 3 times as much for. So it's really just, it's a kind of a cost, benefit equation. If the new software can do most or all of what you're looking for it to do, why should you pay 2 or 3 times as much? And that's the whole open source thing. Now, even some companies are realizing that you get open source, okay, it's only 80%. You know what, I need that extra 10%. They're developing much more quickly than the traditional vendors because they have thousands of people out there doing development work on their own time because it's fun and they want their name on the tweak, So they're moving. Their momentum is way faster, much more momentum than the traditional vendors.
So now that you've got some of the world's largest investment banks accepting working in the cloud, accepting the cloud as a viable technology, security, and everything else that comes along with it.
Yeah.
How is that going to impact the growth of the cloud and cloud technologies?
Well, if it works the way it always has, you get 1 or 2 of them, breaking in and into either an innovation or a cost advantage, and then the whole herd runs. Then when the big banks, when the large institutions start to do it, all the smaller institutions say, must be safe, and oh, by the way, we're in a cost battle with the big boys, so we've got to have those same advantages in terms of cost basis to offer our services. And it's very dramatic. I mean, we're looking at putting an application up on the Amazon cloud for one of the banks in New York City, where the yearly cost would be about $70,000 with our services included. Their internal cost on a yearly basis is $350,000. So they looked at that and said, first of all, is this really true? Because it seems too good to be true, but it is. And so we can actually give them a little bit more horsepower than they're getting now for 1/7 of the cost, 1/5 of the cost. I mean, it's pretty dramatic.
And a little bit less work in terms of maintenance as well. We've been talking here at Cloud Expo with Full 360's Larry Hill. Larry, thanks very much for joining me.
Yeah, pleasure. Thanks.